Good morning.
Good morning.
I am so delighted to have you all with us here, whether you are here in person or with us remotely. We are so grateful for your presence as we continue to sort of look at what is going on in Israel-Palestine, specifically in the West Bank and Hebron. We are blessed today. Oops, you need to mute me over there. Thank you. We are blessed today to have Kathy Kern with us. I have gotten to know Kathy because we are in the Rock Heb organization. This is a Rochester Hebron friendship organization. It is not political in any way, but is about developing the relationship between our two cities and doing work that is supportive of the people of Hebron in realms like education and building playgrounds and offering food and items like that can be supportive of the people there. Kathy worked for the Christian Peacemaker teams from 1993 to 2020 when it became the Community Peacemaker teams. She has served in Haiti, Colombia, Chiagos, Mexico, Kurdistan, and with indigenous communities in North America. But her longest service was in Hebron in Palestine, and I'm so grateful that she is here with us today to give us a deeper look into what is going on in that very incredible, beautiful, troubled region. So welcome, Kathy.
I'll just clarify that typically our stints, our CPT stint is 3 to 5 months, and then we go home or someplace and then come back. But so 20 years means not a solid 20 years, and there was some time off when I was deported. I hope to get through our CPT work in Palestine fairly efficiently and to leave a lot of time for questions at the end. Community peacemaker teams, which as Rebecca said, was Christian peacemaker teams when I was working there, is an accompaniment organization, which means we support organizations and individuals choosing nonviolent ways to resist systemic violence. In addition to Palestine, we are currently in Colombia, Kurdistan, the refugee camps on the Aegean Islands, and we also have a Turtle Island Solidarity Network run by volunteers and seasonal work at the Arizona-Sonora border supporting migrants, and which is actually run by the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, which is one of our sponsoring bodies. So, I started out working in Haiti, and then I was asked to do a 1995 exploratory trip to Palestine and Israel with a colleague, and we traveled all around, but something kept drawing us back to Hebron. I think partly because the violence was terrible, and because it was very targeted. Like every Saturday, settlers in the afternoon would attack people who lived on this stretch of Shahada Street that Rebecca showed you last week. That stretch was called Boya Street, and they would, Saturday afternoon, they would attack people living there, they would attack shops, they would attack the cars, they'd vandalize everything. And when our first and longest friend there, introduced us to a family of a 12-year-old boy who the Saturday before, the settlers had dragged him to the ground and jumped on his leg until it broke. So we wrote a proposal for a 5-month project. At that time, we thought CBT was going to be like an in and out sort of organization, but it turned out that that's not the way to do it. So we've ended up being in locations long term. So we wrote a proposal. The 5-month project was because the Oslo Accords were supposed to be signed by the end of that summer. And Rabin, Yitzhak Rabin, the prime minister, was supposed to remove the Hebron settlers. And we thought, we'll give it an extra 2 months for things to, settle down. So on November 4th, 1995, Rabin was shot. And it turned out that Yigal Amir, the guy who shot Rabin, was the guy that was organizing these Saturday afternoon attacks on Hebron, including one in which my colleague and I were injured. And it's not exactly a brush of greatness, but it was interesting. So all summer long, we had listened to settlers threatening to kill Rabin. Kill Rabin, kill Rabin, kill Peres. We didn't, and we thought they were just, saying nasty things, which they said all the time. Shimon Peres, who took over from Rabin, he could have removed the Hebron settlers then. There was just this huge national outpouring of grief. The Israeli public would have definitely supported him. But he lacked the political courage. And I very well might not be standing here if he had done it. The project would have probably closed years ago. Or we may have lived somewhere else, I don't know. Instead, he let right-wing think tanks control the narrative and say that the assassination had been the result of national disunity. And everyone was all about Israeli and Israeli settler dialogue. And by that time, we began getting involved in the demolition of Palestinian homes, whose owners had the bad luck to have settlements moved next door. And so that became our new focus. We cooperated with the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions and the Palestine Land Defense Committee to bring the attention, which was just not getting any coverage in Israel even. We got our Israeli friends to bring it before the Meretz Party, which was sort of besides Hadash, the Communist Party, was the most left. And between Meretz Party and between in the Hebron area, we matched families with churches back home, and they wrote letters to the government. And by 1999, Natan Sharansky, who was in the cabinet, he was complaining, we can't demolish a home without it becoming an international incident. And yeah, so the demolitions practically ended. And then Ariel Sharon visited the Al-Aqsa Mosque in 2000. And the second Intifada began. I have friends in Hebron that were wistful about the first Intifada because people were really unified then from all levels of society. You'd call a strike and everyone shut down. People didn't go to work in Israel. People resisted taxes. People were just very unified. For the second Intifada, there was far more outrage. Settlements were expanding. Palestinians could no longer travel to Jerusalem. And a lot of Hebronites told us this was the worst thing for them, to no longer be able to pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was also very, very bloody. For the first time, Israeli deaths approached Palestinian deaths in the number, which it had very long been very disproportionate. That was the first couple of years. Afterwards, it resumed. Palestinian deaths were much higher. During that time, we accompanied neighborhoods who were targeted by gun and tank fire. We would sleep in people's houses and notify the American embassy that we were there. And they told us we shouldn't be there. we got shot at. It didn't seem to be very effective. And then we would follow up with families whose members had been killed, just, hanging up, washing, and things like that. In the mornings after heavy bombardment, we would walk, the streets were literally ankle deep in glass. We also had a Beit Jala project. Beit Jala is a little town right next to Bethlehem, who was sort of bordered on 3 sides by the Israeli settlement of Gilo. And Palestinian gunmen came from the Tahiti refugee camp and shot at Gilo, and so they came and shot back at the military shot at Beit Jala from 3 sides, and we found a house that actually was being shot by several sides and reported what was happening for the Christmas season. And this is where our school accompaniment began, because it was essentially the military said the Palestinians weren't allowed to go to school. And the teacher said the children had to get back in school, so we accompanied the children to their schools. And this is what, for me, this is what wore me down. The scenario is that young boys would start throwing stones in the direction of the checkpoint, which, they rarely hit. And soldiers would then start firing tear gas, and which blanketed the whole neighborhood, blanketed all the schools in the area. And then when the young children panicked, we would take their hands and run them into the schools. And then they built a checkpoint that made it impossible for us to reach the children. But we would watch the soldiers and document if they were searching the bags of teachers and students. At one time, a teacher who had been very activist had a knife planted in one of her purses, and she refused to take the bag back and said, "Nope, I saw you put a knife in there. I'm not going to take this bag." And she told the soldier, open that bag and take the knife out." And so it was important that we were there. We'd also keep alcohol wipes on hand so students could wipe their faces in case they had been gassed. Tear gas is a nerve agent. It's actually forbidden by the Geneva Conventions in war. And that's why Palestinians will carry onions and mints and alcohol, because tear gas tells you that you can't breathe. And when you inhale an onion, that tells you can breathe, because you're smelling the. Yeah, but this is why.
Still get tears.
Yeah. This is why babies die because their minds aren't developed enough yet to tell them they can breathe. And after that, they built a solid box that prevented us from seeing what was going on. And so we just asked them questions when they came out. And it was during this time also that we began a South Hebron Hills accompaniment with Operation Dove, which is an Italian peace group. And Khair is, which you have very graciously donated money for their food. It's in the South Hebron Hills. And this evolved into the Akwani project, which we also, where we accompanied shepherds who were vulnerable to attacks by settlers into their fields, and other acts of nonviolent resistance that the villagers developed. The Tawani project closed in 2014 because we were really short on workers due to deportations of international workers. And that also led to the development of mostly Palestinians on the Palestine team, which is the case today. Right now, the Palestine team is talking about the next phase of the Palestine project as being the third Palestinian uprising, the Jerusalem Intifada, October 2015 to the present. And they write, also known as the Intifada of Knives, this most recent uprising is a wave of protests that have been taking place in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and Israel since the beginning of October 2015. It has been marked by Palestinians' repeated stabbings of Israeli soldiers and settlers, as well as Israeli Jews stabbing Palestinians, and extrajudicial executions of Palestinians under the pretext of their attempt to carry out stabbing attacks. The events also coincided with the implementation of Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip, from which rockets were launched toward Israel. And I don't know if it's full circle or not. It's more like, like shaking it up and dumping everything we've always worked on, home demolitions and accompanying schools and settler violence, and it's like everything we've always worked for, the team is dealing with now. So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna grab a drink of water, and then I'll come back, and we can just ask questions.
So maybe you're not sitting in the greatest spot for this question, but I would really love it if you would talk to us a bit about these photographs that are cycling through.
That's when the Israeli police arrested a sheep. In Natswani. This was an Israeli soldiers were forced to accompany the children of Atwani after a lot of really terrible attacks on them by settlers. But I don't think they after attacking them by settlers, and then after two of our people were very badly injured. One had her arm broken, and one had his jaw broken by settlers. And the Meretz people in the Knesset said that this is just unacceptable.
So I switched it to 30 seconds, so
Okay.
we'll have a little more time.
One was it was unacceptable, and so these soldiers were ordered to provide accompaniment for the school children, and we didn't understand. If we were soldiers, like, having the duty to accompany school children seemed like relatively easy duty. You're not going to get shot at, But they weren't particularly nice about it. This was from our first year. This is typically what you'd see with settlers on the street in Hebron.
So they'd just be carrying automatic weapons.
Yeah. These were the girls in Kurtaba school. They were very badly attacked by settlers. They're across from the settlement of Beit Hadassah, and they were, they were attacked by settlers and beaten. And so we and some Israeli friends were at the school for the week afterwards, and the headmistress came to an agreement with the army that the soldiers would not let settlers up into the school anymore. This was after a home demolition. Let's click in. That was our CP. The baseball cap was our first CPT uniform for a while, and then we got vests and armbands. For some reason, some CPTers just really don't like hats. So that's someone they've arrested.
So the guy in the t-shirt is a military police person.
Yeah.
What's the reason for the foot in the back? Can't you just handcuff somebody and leave them alone?
Just to make it worse.
Yes.
That's, yeah, I guess so.
My controls. Certainly shows who's in control.
So here is Shahada Street that Rebecca talked about last week, and this is the settler parade that we saw every Saturday.
Did you say settler parade?
Yeah, every Saturday afternoon, and this was the one where we monitored because there had been attacks on Palestinians every week.
Is it a literal parade or is it a show?
That's what we called it.
Okay.
And these are people trying to get to their homes in Tel Rameda, but the military has blocked it for some reason. And this is at the head of that section of Shuhada Street, and when they get home is when the military feels like opening the fence. What was that? I forget why I included this. I don't know if it's a home demolition or, but it looks like there's some burning there. And it's people trying to retrieve possessions. I can see that.
Well, that certainly is.
Yeah, that's a home demolition.
Is there any rhyme or reason to home demolitions, or did they just
Yeah.
randomly?
Yeah, there is. So basically people, Oslo divided the West Bank into areas A, B, and C. And A is basically the cities. So people, the Palestinian Authority can hand out building permits there. B is
It's the farmland, isn't it?
well, C is mostly farmland. B is sort of in between. And area C is where they do most of the home demolitions. Like I said, those are the people that had the bad luck to have settlements moved next door. A lot of, some of the people we worked with had deeds dating back to the Ottoman Empire and still had their homes demolished. Other people didn't have papers, but in Palestinian society, everyone knew whose land, everyone knew that your land, the Jabber family's land here runs to that rock and over, and that rock, and it was known. And Jordan was in the process of formalizing this when it took over the West Bank after 47-48. And they got about a third of the way through, which left 2/3 of Palestinians without papers. And those, of course, are the ones that are most vulnerable. But even those, like I said, with deeds from Jordanian times or the Ottoman empires, if they want their homes, if they want to demolish those homes, they're going to demolish them. I was watching something the other night where, it's the Tent of Nations, you guys, it's the Tent of Nations guy, and he had these papers, and, he's now at the Israeli Supreme Court, the courts have ruled that the papers aren't valid, and
When did that happen?
I don't know when but they're going to the Israeli Supreme Court.
So
to-
it's not settled yet then.
It's not settled yet.
We have supported them as well, significantly from our perspective, in, and supported paying their attorneys,
Yeah.
as they continue to fight that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think these are deeds they've had for a very long time.
Yeah, theirs is from the Ottoman.
Yeah, they're from the Ottoman Empire too.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I have, like I said, I have friends that I keep in contact with who have papers from the Ottoman Empire. But okay, yeah. So this is in the South Hebron Hills. They arrested a bunch of people at a demonstration, and this sheep got injured, and by a settler, and so they took the sheep as evidence. And there's the kids on the school patrol with the army riding behind them to protect them from settler attacks.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How are you keeping communication with your people? Because the people I know too, I've had almost impossible to keep communicating.
Well, I'll tell my friends with the Ottoman deeds. We do Facebook Messenger
You're
mostly.
able to get through on Messenger.
Yeah, I mean, he has the advantage of having the Kiryat Arba Givat Harsina complex
Yeah.
near your house is that they have really good broadband internet. So they use that.
I mean, maybe you saw in the New York Times this morning, there was an article specifically about the West Bank. And, you know, the dreadfulness. So I just was curious whether you were having trouble.
Yeah, I check in on them about once a week. I check on Hisham Sharabate, our very first friend in Hebron. He works for the Palestinian human rights group Al-Haq.
Yes. I know a lawyer who worked for them for many years, Jonathan Kutab.
Oh, I know Jonathan. Yeah,
Oh,
I know
well,
Jonathan. I know
yeah,
his.
he's in D.C. I hope to see him next week, but I just wanted.
His nephew lives in Syracuse.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Jonathan Brennan, and he works for the Palestinian something.
He's Katab's nephew?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Lydia Kutab is his mother.
But you're able to, at this point, get communication.
Yeah, and Israeli friends too. And
Yeah.
we through Facebook.
I have a question. I've been to Hebron too with the group and have seen what's happening there and seen the settlements around Jerusalem too. And the question I keep asking myself and to others who I'm talking, and the question is, how do we juggle both knowing what the situation has been since the Nakba, you know, for the Palestinians, and yet knowing what has been for the Israelis and from Hamas, and trying to juggle those two things, and, you know.
Well, you come to my house. my husband is Israeli, and two of his friends were killed, and one is still kidnapped in Gaza. As far as we know, she hasn't been killed in the bombing. She was his camp counselor, and Ronit and Orlando were from the next kibbutz over from his, and Ronit was his oldest son's teacher, nursery school teacher. She had written about the art of Argentine protest during the junta. A lot of his friends in Israel, actually, at Tel Aviv University, were people who fled juntas in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. We are going to tour Latin America in this early spring because his daughter's getting married in Colombia, and he's going to try to see if he can get her dissertation published in Argentina.
So how do you balance both, I mean, we all need to balance it, I think.
Yeah, so it's hard. It's really hard because he's not super. Sometimes people aren't super in touch with their emotions, especially men. And and so we've been pretty much on the same page in a lot of ways in the past. You know, that we've always been against the current Israeli government. We've always believed that Palestinians and Israelis should have the same human rights, exactly the same. He has a friend in Gaza, actually. He was one of the workers who was in Israel at the time that the war started, but he's now back in Gaza. But now it's like deeply, he's feeling a lot of anger and sadness and fear, and that is, and very angry at Hamas. Whereas, you know, my actual experience with Hamas in Hebron is they ran bakeries and orphanages, and you know, gave out food, gave out charity, and yes, there's a militant wing, and yes, they're an authoritarian group, and you know, just picture some of the worst right-wing evangelicals, you know, running this country. But also think of some very conservative fundamentalist people in your family who are pretty nice. You know, that it's all that. And so I have a more nuanced, but the people on October 7th that, you know, committed atrocities, the Hamas militants committed atrocities. And so I think you have to respect the grieving process, and the fear that partisans of Israel are feeling. I think, but you have to keep saying that Palestinians and Israelis deserve exactly the same rights, and that what Israel is doing now is a war crime, and that if your children were in Gaza right now and being bombed and starved, even if you thought it was a worthy cause, would you find that acceptable? You know, as my therapist is Jewish, and I, you know, and we're talking about this, and you know, and I said, it's just I'm all about the civilians, you know, and she said, yeah, that's basically her too. So it's, and a lot of Jews in the U.S., that's where they are too. They're all about the civilians, and certainly with younger Jews. And you see the establishment, Jewish federations and stuff, going after these young people and like kicking them off college campuses and you know, actually trying to, you know, kick them out of Judaism. And it's like, you know, you don't have that many people that you can afford to kick out.
Quick question about Hamas. I mean, obviously, their tactics are deplorable, but I'm kind of fascinated by discussions which revolve around this idea. If we eradicate Hamas, things will get better. Is it fair to say that if Hamas was somehow eliminated, something else, a similar organization would rise up because the conditions for Palestinians are so dire?
Yeah, yes. The people who think killing off Hamas would make everything better, don't, you know, it's, Hamas got there for a reason, and members of the Hamas militant wing have probably suffered a lot in their life. They probably have seen horrible things. I don't think anyone would do what they did. You know, suicide bombers don't, no one blows themselves up just for the heck of it. You know, they probably experienced terrible things to make them that willing to die.
And just as an add-on, I'm fascinated, or dare I say, like, almost terrified of the distinction between ceasefire and humanitarian pause. It sounds like the people who are arguing, the politicians who are arguing for a humanitarian pause are saying, well, we have to take care of Hamas. In other words, once they're eliminated, well, maybe then we can negotiate.
I can't begin to tell you how angry I am with my president.
Amen.
I just,
He can't say the word ceasefire, and it seems like
he is complicit in genocide. Joe Biden is complicit in genocide. And I moved from Twitter to this platform called Spoutable, which is like, it functions like Twitter, but it's kinder and gentler. And there's a lot of pro-Biden people on that have been like lecturing young people, and you know, and Muslims and arrows, because you know, if you don't vote for Biden, you know, it's going to be even worse under Trump. But you know, it's like asking Jews to vote for an anti-Semite. It's
Following up on your point, I can tell you, I was in Gaza in 1989 with my husband in a peace organization. And we were with medical people and religious leaders. And Ali Arab Hospital, the first one where the missile hit in the outer section. I remember standing there at that time, and we had been visiting patients on the wards with the doctors and so on. And I held in my hand the shell casings of bullets that had been taken out of these people at that time that said "Made in the USA." And following up on your point, at that point, Hamas was basically a social service organization, servicing the people, because the people were living, frankly, in a cage. Jimmy Carter was right. It's apartheid. I've been in South Africa also. It's what it's been. It is an apartheid situation. And the people in the setting at that time, and we participated in, I won't pay taxes to my occupiers in the West Bank. We participated in that also. And I can see in the evolution of Hamas, from what I understand from people living in the region, and from Jonathan, that evolution, the faction became radicalized because they were running up against what you lived in over and over and over again every day. And so I'm not excusing atrocities. Obviously I wouldn't, but I say, but for the grace of God, how long would I not go nuts in a situation like that, when you're talking of 57 years of a military occupation, where the pictures you're showing have been going on a continuous basis. And we just have not had full information. It's been blocked. I spoke once at a church in Pennsylvania, and I found out later the head of the World Zionist Organization had snuck in the back, and a week later I got death threats on the telephone. That's been going on for a long time. And a few of us have had experiences just by virtue of what happened in my life. And your point's so well made, you know. Trauma over 57 years for both groups of people does terrible things. Now everybody's in grief and traumatized, you know. I don't know how you, but having said that, I'm a hopeful person because, in a way, because I have seen and I see that there are people like you, all of us in this room, who just, you know, find a way. I don't know how, but they find a way to carry on.
I don't know how to be hopeful because
Yeah.
I see the money keep flowing. I
I
see
know.
the mainstream press coverage. Like maybe you're familiar with some of these names like Mark Lamont Hill and
Yeah.
Katie Halper. I mean, you
Yeah.
find interesting and provocative news coverage on those corners of the internet, but you turn on CNN and so forth.
I know.
And even on college campuses, I work on one.
Yeah.
The opportunities for open discussion are so limited.
Well, my niece is a professor at George Mason University, and she's Lebanese American. She's daughter of the former head of the Middle East Council of Churches. And she and her sister, Gabby Habib, who spoke here at Third Church many years ago, was my brother-in-law. And they were doing a peaceful demonstration on the Mason campus this weekend. And they were horribly harassed by the right-wing faction of the Jewish students. On the other hand, the peace faction of the Jewish students were with them. So, you know, and then you saw the big demonstrations in London yesterday. I find hope in the young people's demonstrations, and if there was one here, I would show up as an elder, because I think that's something we can do. Show up as elders to be supportive of these young people who are saying, we've had it with this way of living in the world, you know.
And if Biden loses, it might be because of the young people and
I think so too.
Arabs and
Yeah.
Muslims.
Kathy, one way to take away Israeli government propaganda point about Palestinians not having elections is to just have elections.
Yeah.
Is there, other than the government keeping many leaders in jail, is there a reason, what's your sense of why they don't do that?
Well, they do keep Palestinians that would have a unifying effect on the people in jail. Marwan Barghouti is one person that pretty much all Palestinians could rally around, except for probably the most religious. But even some of the religious people recognize that he's an honest and decent man with the best interest, their best interests at heart, and they would vote for him. But that's why he was sentenced to life in Israeli jails.
And what about the PLO?
The PL, well, I don't know, but does the PLO exist anymore?
I think so.
It does? Okay. The PA is just irredeemably corrupt. No one I know in Hebron trusts it, and I have friends who've been actively harmed by it, by its corruption, and have lost land to a privileged upper echelon PA guy. Just that it all stacks. The deck is stacked in favor of elite PA people.
So we're really saying that the Palestinians don't have any
There-
trusted leaders, and
there
they
are no
haven't for a long time.
there are no trusted leaders. Another thing that makes me furious at Biden, why are they talking to Mahmoud Abbas? I mean, surely they have people on the ground that have told them that's a waste of time. Why aren't they talking to Palestinian civil society leaders, women's groups and trade unions and,
There's a
students
name,
groups?
there's a name, maybe you know it. And if you don't, I would suggest that you find her, Hanan Ashwari.
Oh, yeah.
Hanan was
Sure.
my sister.
Yes, I know Hannah.
She
Yeah.
was
met
my
her, didn't we?
sister's college roommate.
Yeah.
And, she carries on. That's someone to pay attention to. I saw
Yes.
her interviewed once on NPR recently.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people that rally behind her. There's some conservative Muslims wouldn't, because she, not only because she's woman, but a Christian. But I would vote for her.
Back to the college campuses, it seems to me that they would do an awful lot of good if these were rallies, Palestinians and Jewish together are, or
Some are.
There are some.
Some are.
Yeah.
some are doing that,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much that's so much Jewish tradition to be advocating for people with in an unpopular cause. That is a real, that's wherever there were unpopular causes for human rights, you always had Jews there. So it's these right wingers that are the ones that are not following Jewish political tradition.
Jewish organization Tikkun, if you don't know
Yeah.
about it, everybody should pay attention to them.
So there have been rallies.
T-I-K-K-U-N,
I don't know
Tikkun.
if folks know.
It's out of California.
Yeah.
And it's a Jewish peace organization.
You want to speak to that, Elaine?
Sure, there have been rallies here. There were two large rallies at the Liberty Pole just last week, the week before. Well attended with many Palestinians who sort of come out of the woodwork, if you will, because they don't normally speak out, but they were speaking out loud and clear. And I think one of them was around 250 people. I was at that one. There was one at the U of R just a few days ago. There is one scheduled at RIT, I think, this Tuesday.
And are they a mixture?
Well, anyone can attend.
Right, I realize that, but are they?
So, I'm not sure how to respond to it. Are they a mixture?
What I meant, are they protesting and marching together, saying we are for human rights, not?
Well, they're definitely Palestinian human rights rallies.
You'd be welcome, Betty.
You will hear from the rivers to the sea, Palestine will be free, which some Jews view as a call to Jewish genocide, but it's really
About freedom.
it's really about just Palestine freedom. Yeah, I don't know if you remember here when Robin Wilt in Brighton had all these attacks on her, but because she wrote hashtag Free Palestine on a Facebook post.
Bless her heart.
How does one find out about these things? I mean, I live here and I didn't know.
You talk to Elaine.
Okay.
Well, you know, I usually send that information out on an email list of ours, but that's not a widespread email list.
I think you have to follow the right Instagram people. That's where most of it's happening.
Most of it's happening that way.
But Jim, do you put it out in this group?
No,
No.
not unless I know about it.
Oh, well, I assumed that you knew about it.
I mean,
Because I send it out on the leaders.
It comes out in Leaders, yeah.
So maybe, I don't know if we ought to get back to Hebron
Yeah.
specifically, but we're gonna need to wrap up in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you can, but, coming up next week, do you want to talk just a little
Yeah,
bit about
Hamid Kouazmi is a friend of ours. He He used to work for the municipality of Hebron, or the Hebron governor's office. And then because he, I don't know how many of you remember, there were like 4 guys kidnapped in Iraq, in Baghdad, a number of years ago, and one of them was killed. Those were our guys. And while they were in captivity in the Hebron, held a rally and to release the captives, and it include imams from a number of different mosques, including Hamas, and other civic leaders. And Hamid organized all that, and the governor told him, if you do that, you're out of a job, because of some of the mosques were not pro-PA. And but he did it anyway. So he was out of a job. Then he got a job with OCHA, which is a United Nations organization. And then he decided, I could really distribute aid much more efficiently myself. I could get it to the people who needed it most myself. And then he founded something called HERN, the Hebron International Relief Network. Yeah. And so that's what he's been doing for the last several years. And he will be speaking via Zoom to you next week, and I'll be here to see him. And he's a longtime friend of the CPT Hebron.
So he'll be able to reach us, you think?
Inshallah. He wants to. He wants to. His Facebook page is, he's not a happy person these days, but no one is.
All right. Thank you very much.